all of this stuff, and it's coming from the Jewish community. This isn't coming from Muslims. It's not coming from Christians. The Talmud has 8 different genders. The Bible has 2. The Quran has 2. So, I don't care about gays, right?
Welcome to Marcus Vance Global. The line between political debate and absolute geopolitical warfare has just been completely erased. Dan Bilzerian, the former military man and king of social media, has officially entered the political arena in Florida, challenging GOP Congressman Randy Fine. But this isn't a standard campaign. After being ranked by international agencies as a highly controversial influencer, Bilzerian sat down to expose what he calls the financial and geopolitical grip over American foreign policy. He dropped the filters, brought the raw receipts, and attacked the very foundations of Washington's blank checks. If you are ready for a perspective the mainstream media refuses to broadcast, you are in the right place. Let's get straight into it.
Proud to bring on the #1 anti-Semite in the world, Dan Bilzerian. Thank you for coming on, buddy.
There we go. That's the introduction I want.
Okay, fantastic. Now, I just want to, real quick, I've been wanting to talk about this since it happened, but I figured I'd wait till I had you on. Now, this is the guy you're running against. This is
yeah, that beauty of a man. There he is.
He's the guy. He's definitely not doing one meal a day. So now you called him a fat Jew. Now you can see he is fat and he is a Jew, and
Correct.
So you were brought on TMZ, and I just want to play a little bit of this because it's funny to me. These guys were foaming at the mouth trying to corner you on this, and let's just see how it went.
You called your opponent this fat Jew. So he's not from Israel, but you called a guy in Florida this fat Jew. How is that not anti-Semitic?
Well, he's a Jewish supremacist, and he puts Israel before America, and I think that he should be tried for treason.
This fat Jew is anti-Semitic.
Yes.
Dan.
I mean, that's what you say, but how about
that's
every single time
that's what I know. I don't say it. I know
he
it.
literally talks about how Muslims are lower than dogs. So is that Islamophobic?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And Harvey had to think about it for a second. Now, you talk a lot about, this is a perfect example of there's a special cutout for Jewish people. And you can, if I called someone a fat Italian, or if I called someone a fat Armenian, that would not be seen as a slur towards Italians or Armenians. But for some reason, when you say it about someone who's Jewish, that is anti-Semitic. Can you understand their thinking at all? What is that about?
Well, they like to put themselves in a victim category. And that's really the main issue here. And that's why Jewish supremacy is such a threat, is because not only are they the most privileged class in the world, but they've somehow managed to back themselves into a victim category. So they are beyond reproach. If you criticize them, they have this special word, anti-Semitism. And what that does is, because of how they baked it in with the media and movies, it kind of, gives people pause. It's like, oh man, that sounds really bad, anti-Semitism. The funny thing is most of the Jews in Israel aren't technically Semites. They don't, they're not from that region. They're Eastern European, and they don't speak a Semitic language. Semite is an Arab, somebody that speaks Aramaic or, a language from that region, and they don't really qualify for that. So it's just kind of like one more thing that they've hijacked and stolen, which is why I push back so much on the anti-Semitic term, is because I don't feel like it's an accurate description of what they're saying.
And so so here's Randy Fine, and he's only been in Congress a short time, and he's already taken over $1 million from AIPAC, which is just one of the funding ways that the Zionist lobby influences and funds of politicians in the United States. It's just one. So there's, of course, look at Miriam Adelson gave $250 million directly to Trump. So there's other ways for the Zionists too. So that's just one. But walk us through. Now, you were never a political guy. You never ran for office. What made you decide? I mean, you're a former, military guy. What made you decide to do this?
Well, I traditionally wasn't a super political guy. I never had any intentions on, being in Congress or anything like that. I think at the start of this, if you want to call it a war, I call it a genocide, that Israel started perpetuating upon these Palestinians, I think it forced people to kind of...
What you are witnessing is a massive shift in how public figures approach international conflicts. Instead of hiding behind calculated public relations statements, Bilzerian is forcing a direct confrontation regarding national debt, foreign aid, and military spending. He is highlighting a system that many American taxpayers feel is fundamentally broken, where billions are spent abroad while domestic issues are ignored. Let's look closer at how he explains his transition from a non-political figure to a congressional candidate.
Yeah, I traditionally wasn't a super political guy. I never had any intentions on, being in Congress or anything like that. I think at the start of this, if you want to call it a war, I call it a genocide, that Israel started perpetuating upon these Palestinians. I think it forced people to kind of start confronting this issue because there's just so much unequivocal data, all these, images, you've got photos, videos of, I mean, everything from killing aid workers to double tapping hospitals, which means you basically hit the hospital, then you wait for, the journalists and the family and whatever to come over there and try and save people from the rubble, and then you hit them again. You've got paramedics that are driving down the street with their lights, flashing and whatever, and they're just being gunned down by Israelis. They denied that, and then they later found the footage in the shallow graves that they put these paramedics in. And then you see the children being shot in the head. You've got the soup kitchen workers that were registered with the Israeli military that were obviously targeted because they hit two cars miles apart that were registered with the IDF as being soup kitchen workers. And then you see in the group chats the Israelis, laughing about this and whatever. And it's so much that you can't argue. I mean, that this is a war. This is clearly a genocide. And I think the biggest piece of it was that we're funding it and that we're supporting it. And that is, I think, what opened a lot of people's eyes. And then you start kind of like zooming out and you look at how much of our national debt is because of our support of Israel when you compound the interest, because every dollar that we gave them wasn't just extra money we had lying around. We borrowed every single dollar that we've ever given Israel and given Egypt on behalf of Israel. And so you have to do the compounding interest. Then you look at the, the wars that we fought. Netanyahu came and he testified in front of Congress that they had weapons of mass destruction. And so we fought the Iraq war on a false, premise for them, really. I mean, they're the ones that wanted that regime toppled. That cost us, by the most conservative estimates, $8 trillion. So if you look at the compounding interest that you would have to add to that as well, I mean, we're at over $20 trillion, which is more than half of our national debt just because of our support of a country that's never done anything for us. They've sold our secrets. They've attacked us. I could go on and on, but I look at that and I'm like, man, this system is broken. Then you've got the Epstein files that they're refusing to release. I mean, 4 months after they were, according to Congress, legally obligated to release these files, they still have not done so. And then the Iran war was the last straw for me. I mean, that was just such a ridiculous thing for us to get involved in when we had all the different advisors told us that they were not a credible threat. They didn't have nuclear missiles. They didn't have ICBMs. It was just, anyways, I could go on and on. But the reason I'm getting involved is because I feel like everybody's frustrated and nobody's doing anything about it. And because I have a big following, I feel like I have an obligation to kind of step forward and do this, because if I don't, nobody else will.
And so, let me just, so you've said, a lot of people, I say that, because I know a lot of Jews that don't support Benjamin Netanyahu. They don't support Israel. They don't support Zionism. And so what I always say, and in fact, most of the Jews I...
Dan Bilzerian didn't come to play by the traditional rules of political correctness. By bringing historical text, economic data, and military observations to the table, he held up a mirror to the military-industrial complex. You don't have to agree with every single word or definition he uses to realize the core truth. People are completely exhausted by politicians who are not transparent, and they are tired of seeing American tax dollars finance open-ended conflicts with zero exit strategies. The era of silent compliance is officially over.
Religious issue, I think it's because they think that they're better than everybody, that they're chosen from God. Their religious texts, say that they're allowed to lie, cheat, and steal from Gentiles. It says that, Gentiles were basically like cattle to them. Not to mention, they believe that Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior for Christians, is burning in human shit in hell. The Virgin Mary's a whore, and that Christians are idol worshipers, and that's why they spit on them in Israel. So I look at this as a Jewish supremacy problem, and Zionism is kind of like an offshoot of that.
So what do you? So I've heard that. So Kurt, who's normally on the show with me, he makes that they believe that Jesus Christ is burning in hell and shit. And then I had a Jewish friend text me and said, I'm 50 years old. I never heard that before. But so where do you get that from?
Well, there's many sources. The Talmud is one. Peter Schaefer, he was the head of Judaic studies at Princeton, and he was also the head of the board at the Museum of I believe it was Jewish History or the Holocaust Museum in Berlin. And he wrote a book called Jesus in the Talmud, and he lines out exactly all the different passages, word for word, of what they say about Jesus Christ in there. And it's really vile stuff. And it is just contrary to, the Christian religion. So it's not something that every single Jew believes. I'm not saying that. I'm not also saying that every single Jew is a problem. What I'm saying is that the Jewish supremacist mindset is causing a big problem. And I also feel like this is a perfect example of, if you were to say Russians are causing problems, you wouldn't have to qualify that with saying, but not every Russian is a problem. When Bill Maher makes all these statements about, Muslims, are they're the
mother
worst,
load.
and the mother load of bad ideas is Islam, and Randy Fine says, kill them all. They never have to qualify that with, but not all Muslims are bad. But for some reason, when you criticize Jewish supremacy or Zionism, you have to then carve out this thing of like, but not every Jew is bad. Like, obviously, not every Jew is bad. I mean, only an idiot would say that every single person, of a 16 million population, ethnicity, religion, whatever you want to call them, is a bad person. I'm not saying that. It would be a silly thing to say that. However, you can say that they are causing a massively disproportionate amount of problems, and that any kind of a supremacist mindset is going to cause issues. Anytime you think that you're better than other people, you look at South African apartheid, you look at, anything historically, anytime a group thinks that they're better than other people, traditionally they do not treat them with the same humanity that they would treat their own tribe. And so when I look at a Jew, and this is, let's just go back 5 years. When I look at a Jew, I look at him as like, an equal. There was no better. There was no worse. I had no animosity towards them. In fact, the idea that a Jew wouldn't like me never even crossed my mind, because in my mind, we've always stuck up for Jews. We saved them in World War II. We've always been a friend of the Jews. And so why would a Jew ever not like me? And when I really started to dive into the religion and see what their chief rabbis are saying, and see what the Talmud says, and see how they've behaved historically in the history that they never teach us about, like the Bolshevik genocide, the Holodomor, all these instances where Jews are mass murdering Christians, which they never talk about in the textbooks and never teach us, and things that preceded World War II. Then you start getting a little bit better of a picture of what actually happened historically, and not just what you were taught.
So, how are you going to combat the attacks that say that you don't make that distinction, that you say we have a Jew problem?
I'm Marcus Vance. This is Marcus Vance Global, where we look past the sanitized news and follow the real facts. Hit subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you on the next report. Peace.